Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the live stream of this week. Today is June 14th, and as always, as every week, we'll be showing you around in our product meshStack. So my name is Jelle. I am a product manager at meshcloud, and I will be your guide today, demonstrating our product, what it can do, how it can help you and your organization. So let's get started. Good morning, Björn. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started with explaining a little bit about what meshStack actually is. So we call it a cloud foundation platform. It means that this is a platform that's aimed at helping the core cloud team at large organizations accelerate and enabling the cloud, ideally across multiple clouds. For example, if you're using Azure and GCP at the same time. If you're not familiar with the term cloud foundation, often what's used as well as cloud center of excellence. It just basically means that there's one team in the organization that's responsible for accelerating and enabling cloud usage. And that's exactly the audience that our platform helps. So, to start with, we have a important model. We call it the mesh model. And the mesh model is basically a cloud agnostic blueprint of what your organization's model look like. I put it up here right now. It's called the Cloud Universe. In here you can see it a little bit more interactively, but I'll also go into each more detail of these concepts, but it basically means you have a customer, and there's one or more projects, and in there's one or more tenants. We'll look at that in a moment, what that means. And the model is also searchable, and you can look, for example, for a particular person or project if you wanted to. So for example, I'm looking for Daniela. She's right here, the blue dot. Daniela developer, and I can see even to what objects in the model she is assigned to. All right, let's dive a bit deeper into the model, starting with customers. This is really the top level of our model. Customer, it's up to you what you make out of it, but usually we see it as an application team or maybe a particular application, and this application is using a customer to manage all of their different projects. We can also think about it as a workspace, which we will name it soon anyway, and in this workspace you will manage your projects, you will assign your team members, and do a few other high-level management things. Then within the customer we have multiple projects. We can see here, for example, which projects belong to one customer, but we also have the ability to see all projects at once, which is also nice. So here I can see all the projects that I have in this particular meshStack. A project is more fine-grained, a more concrete actual project in the cloud. There can be multiple. As you can see here, for example, this project has an Azure Kubernetes cluster, an Azure subscription, and a Google Cloud project assigned to it. These are so-called tenants. And on the projects, again, I assign some people, I assign a budget, so I make sure that the costs that I'm causing are accounted for, and I have, again, a few other management capabilities. And then at the most bottom level, you can see it here already with the little icons, we have tenants. These are also visible from a top-down view. And the tenant is really a concrete and tangible item in the cloud. We usually pick something that the cloud provider thinks is a good abstraction layer. So for Azure, this is a subscription. For Google Cloud, this is a project. For Kubernetes, for example, this is a namespace, and so on. So each cloud platform that we integrate with has its own encapsulated concept in the cloud. That's it. That's what your application teams or your product teams will use. So they have a customer, they have multiple projects, and they have multiple tenants. Then we also have, of course, just some basic user management. So these users that are in your meshStack, that can be visible here. So I see all of the users that are in this particular meshStack. so it's mainly just our team in here right now. And yeah, these are usually, it depends on your setup, but they're synced from another identity provider. This could be a Google Workspace identity, but also Azure Active Directory. You don't have to do this manually. This is all just synchronized from some other source. Okay. Then moving on. Maybe what's also interesting to look at in the model is the actual platforms. So yeah, enable to even be able to have, for example, GCP tenants managed by meshStack, you need to have a so-called mesh platform. We call it a mesh platform because it's really where meshStack and the particular cloud platform intersect, and it's exactly integrated and how behaved how you want it to be. So this is where you configure such things. As of today, we have a couple, quite a couple of integrations. We have AWS, we have Azure, we have Azure Kubernetes Service. So that's particularly for if you're using Azure Kubernetes, you can manage this also as a platform in meshStack, which has a couple of benefits. We have Azure Resource Groups if that's something you prefer over subscriptions. We have Cloud Foundry, which is a private cloud platform. We have GCP. We have Kubernetes. We have the marketplace, this is a custom platform for meshStack, and we have OpenShift and OpenStack, which are also private clouds. So these are all the cloud platforms that we, as of today, support in meshStack. We have a couple of them integrated here already. We have 1, 2, 3. We have 7 of them, so pretty much all the big providers you saw before, we have them up and running here. Yeah, speaking about platform integration, the way meshStack works is it's a desired state model. If you're doing like infrastructure as code with Terraform, for example, you know exactly what this means. So meshStack, it doesn't just upon changes or whatever, do the actual changes in the cloud platform, but it does this on a repetitive basis. So it means that if you have configured your, I don't know, your Azure subscription to look a certain way and someone changes this in the cloud, it will be so-called replicated again, at least once a day. So it is a desired state model as well. So it really, based on how you model it, it will always look like that within 24 hours. All right, that is a little bit about the model. There are a lot more interesting buttons around here, but it's just the important ones we got covered now. So there is the mesh model, so customer, projects, users, tenants, and platforms. So what we saw so far is we call it the administration area. So all of this that you see so far has been on the admin side. So this is where the Cloud Foundation team or the Cloud Center of Excellence is doing their business. But we also serve all these, could be hundreds of application teams. And to be able to look at their point of view, we can actually go into one of these. So at the moment, my user, Anna Admin, she's assigned to these 5 customers. There could be a lot more customers, which you can check here, which there are. But the current 5 that I'm assigned to are the ones I can access. So let's head into Liquid mobile app. And yeah, this is actually now a mesh customer that I'm looking at. And let's start up with looking at some aspects from the customer. So as I mentioned before, there are users assigned to this customer. So I would assign pretty much my entire team to this. Doesn't even matter who needs access to what, just the entire team, because the actual assigning access to cloud projects happens on another level. So here I would assign everybody from the team. I would make a few people admin so that they can do some management stuff, and then the rest of them would just be regular team members. And yeah, within this customer, I can have a look at the cost that I'm causing. I can have a look at maybe some compliance issues that I have with regards to tags. I'll get to that later, what tags are. And yeah, just some few other settings. So that's the mesh customer. Then we can go to individual projects. They look like this. So in the project, I see exactly which tenants I have. So I think I showed you this one already in the administration area. These are the couple of tenants that I own here in this particular project. I assign again the people to it. And this means these people assigned here, these are really people that get assigned to the cloud project as well. So yeah, you have to be a bit careful who you assign here, because if you have a production project with sensitive workload, you want to assign, of course, as little as people as possible. Yeah, we have again, some overall costs overview, just seeing what costs we're causing in this particular project. We can look into more details, we'll do that later. And we can assign the payment method. This is pretty much the budget that I'm consuming at the moment for this particular project. All right, then just showing you maybe the last layer, the actual tenant. So in the tenant, I can go and click the magical button to actually go into the cloud. So this would take me to Azure, which is pretty cool. So you can use meshStack as a tool if you have if you're an application team, or even you're part of multiple application teams. It's a very convenient way to easily get access to the right subscriptions and Google Cloud projects and so on. And again, I can see the costs of this particular Azure subscription and some other things. All right. Yeah, what would be cool maybe is we can actually walk through. No, before I do that, let's go back to the admin area, because I want to show you something in terms of platform management. So one thing that we should discuss before we actually go and create a project are landing zones and building blocks. We'll start with landing zones. So landing zones are really a template for a project. This goes both in the direction of being able to provision some workload already, so that the team doesn't start out with nothing, and also the landing zone is a way to enforce some basic guardrails so that the teams are already subject to some policies. For example, like you wouldn't want to have your teams maybe provision workload in China or other sensitive regions. And the landing zone is exactly the tool to do these kind of things, so that when they provision the new project, automatically behind the scenes these guardrails are rolled out and you're already protected from some basics. It depends up to you how you build up your landing zone, but we can all configure that in meshStack, and we can integrate some capabilities from the cloud platforms. Yeah, this just makes sure really that you get the teams up and running quickly, but also securely, so that you don't have a lot of manual work provisioning all these projects by hand. That's one thing. So the landing zones, they're supported for each platform. So each type of platform in meshStack actually needs to have a landing zone before it's usable. You cannot create any projects without any landing zones. And then we have building blocks, and these actually tie on top, or you build them on top of the landing zones. We call this concept modular landing zones, so that the landing zone is the base plate of your project, and you can stack a few individual pieces on top of it that you might want. The Cloud Foundation team, you decide exactly which building blocks exist and how they work. They're very specific, but it's really cool the way you can automate these, because they integrate right with Terraform, as you can see here. So you write your Terraform, your little building block, the thing that should be repeatable, that should be provisionable, and meshStack takes care of the whole UI and self-service experience, so that actually the teams can see a list of which building blocks exist and provision them very easily. So together with landing zones and building blocks, we get this modular landing zone experience where teams really can easily pick out a base plate and some other cloud building blocks that they want to use, and that makes it just so quickly and smooth to get up and running in the cloud. All right, those are landing zones and building blocks. Then one last bit that is interesting when you are about to create a project, or when you want application teams to be able to create your own projects, are tags and policies. We have them here under the compliance section. So in general, even if you don't use meshStack, you probably use tags. Like every cloud platform has its concept of tags, so that you can label your resources a little bit more than just a name, so that you can see that a virtual machine maybe belongs to someone. You could use it for cost centers, so that you can actually see who is responsible for the cost, and there are some other use cases for tags as well. It's just having some custom metadata on kinds of resources. And here in meshStack, we have a really convenient way to work with metadata. So on the mesh model, as I showed you before, so mesh customer, mesh project, so mesh landing zone as well, which is then a mesh tenant, and a mesh payment method, the budget. You can apply your own metadata on these. We can have a look at one of them. So for example, we put down customer owner, so we actually enforce people to type in the name. As you can see it here, this is what it would look like, the name of the owner of this customer. And what's really cool is this is a multi-cloud tagging capability. So you tag things in the mesh model, which is a cloud agnostic thing, right? It's from meshStack, and then very easily, if you enable replication, it doesn't even matter which platform you use, it will be tagged in the cloud as well. So if you put the customer owner and you tick this box and you create a new Azure subscription, that particular Azure subscription will also be tagged with the metadata. And it goes for the same thing for GCP and AWS and so on. Yeah, so that's one part. So metadata, just, yeah, it's really useful that you can, you have the model, right? You have, and even in the cloud you have resources, but adding some metadata to them just to making sure that, and being able to identify them better and know better what purposes they're used for. Yeah, the tags, they can be extended even a bit further using policies. So policies apply on 2 tags. So for example, I have one here, it's called project landing zone, and it applies from the mesh project environment tag, these blue bubbles, to the mesh landing zone tag, the environment tag. And what this does is it basically enforces that the project and the landing zone tag are the same. What you can achieve by this is that you get a consistent and enforced metadata model, and you can also steer your teams a little bit. So let's say your team creates a new project and it's a production project for a mobile app, like the one we had here in the Liquid mobile app. If they would have production on here as an environment tag, they wouldn't be able to pick any other landing zone. So they couldn't pick a development landing zone in that case, and maybe, yeah, they could have like less guardrails, for example, because you want to have less guardrails in your development project. And it really enforces that they are guided and that they pick the right landing zone, that they pick the right objects for the purpose. That's the point of policies. You can use a lot more. You can make any of them as you want. The environment ones is a good one. It goes for the same level here, mesh customer and mesh project environment. This does the same thing, so that if I have a mesh customer with, it could even be multiple tag values. So the mesh customer, for example, is tagged with environment QA and dev. It wouldn't be able to create any production projects because it's missing that tag. It's not matching. All right, with that in mind and that shown to you, let's go ahead and use all of the concepts that I explained to you so we can create a new project. So this really would be the magical moment of giving the application teams a UI to quickly create a new Azure subscription or Google Cloud project with all those guardrails and building blocks and so on in place. So what they would do is they would log into the new customer. If they don't have one already, they would create a new project. They give it a name, so I don't know, what would I want to do? I want to have the mobile app production, so call it prod, mobile app prod. Project owner, that's me. Environment, yeah, let's as mentioned, pick production. We'll pick internal confidentiality. We are the business unit. So as mentioned, these are all tags configured in the admin area, so they were decided by the Cloud Foundation team. They're not something standard baked into meshStack, but it's really customizable and up to you what you do with these. So let's pick HR. Allowed landing zone families. This is actually about picking what kind of cloud project I want. So lift and shift would be more old school, container platform or cloud native, and I want to do cloud native. This is a great use case, by the way, for these steering teams. So maybe you have a lift and shift landing zone, container platform landing zone, and a cloud native landing zone. Using this particular tag and policies, you can really steer teams in the right direction so that a cloud native project doesn't pick a lift and shift landing zone, for example. All right, then we have payment methods. Payment methods are pretty much budgets. So just like if you order something on Amazon and you need a payment method, in meshStack it's also important that you have a payment method so that you're responsible for the costs. So you need to get these from the Cloud Foundation team, or maybe you can synchronize them from SAP or something like that. We have great APIs. So we have one around here, playground budget. We'll use that for now. Cloud platform, so this is actually picking which particular clouds I want to use. So I would go today with Azure. Then, as you can see here on the left, some extra configuration pops up for Azure. So yeah, I said that I opted in for Azure. I want to create a new Azure tenant, so I have to enter some basic configuration. The landing zone would be asked at this point. So as I said, every tenant needs to have a landing zone, needs to have this base plate in place. So I pick my landing zone, and I would move on to the next step, which is adding my team members. So obviously I want to have me on the project, and I can also add Daniela, developer, who's going to help me build this project. So that's the two of us on here. Then I have one last screen to actually review what I'm about to do. So I can see again the name, I see those tags that I picked before in the green bubbles right here. I see which playground, the budget I picked, playground budget. I see the cloud platforms I picked. I also get the marketplace always included. The marketplace is exactly where you can book these building blocks that I talked about before. So even after you create the project, you can head in here and see which building blocks are available. I can book them on demand, and I see the people that I'm assigning. Yeah, then I would create project. I'm not doing that right now because yeah, with all the APIs in the background, it could easily take 10 minutes, for example, or even longer with Azure to actually create a new Azure subscription. So I will skip it for now. Go back to the customer here. But I can show you for an existing one what it would look like. So here is the Azure subscription, Google Cloud project, and so on. So I can go to this particular tenant, click on Google Cloud Console, press this beautiful blue button, and you will actually see that I am now in Google Cloud. So this is really the cloud, and yeah, including maybe the bit of the creation process in the background, the teams really get up and running in 10 minutes from the thought of, hey, I need a new project, to, hey, I have a new project. And all of the guardrails and building blocks and base plates for the teams are in place, so they're really, like in 10 minutes, they are ready to go to use the cloud in a proper way. They're enabled, they're equipped to do whatever they want to do without any manual interaction in between. So you can see just how quick it really is to get your cloud project with meshStack. It's incredibly quick. And you have full control as the Cloud Foundation team. All right. Maybe just to show you also the building blocks. So now that I have a GCP project, I can actually look at the catalog of this building blocks. At the moment, as it sees here, there are no building blocks added to this mesh tenant, but I can add one quickly at the top right. There are no available because Google Cloud doesn't have any. The building blocks are defined on a per platform basis, so I think Azure is actually the one that has the building blocks. Yeah, you can see there's already 9 of them, and I can book another one if I wanted to. So this is what I meant. I have already here the Azure tenant. It has a landing zone, it has a base plate, and you can add these modular building blocks at any time I want to. I could add, yeah, it's up to the Cloud Foundation team that what is available here, but we just built a couple of them here. Azure Cosmos DB, Azure VNet, yeah, I can click on these, enter any potential details that I would have to do, click on save, and then the thing would be created in the background using Terraform, and yeah, and then you get a really nice experience as well for these little services that you might want to have offered to your teams. All right, yeah, that is the customer, the project, and the tenant view in a rough idea. Yeah, maybe something to show you as well as the cost. So I can look at the costs from each level in the model. So the customer and the project and the tenant, I can look at the costs for each of these. So if I want to have a really high level overview of the cost and just curious, like what does my application team consume in the whole month for all projects, I can look at that. But I could also really look at, okay, hey, this Azure tenant from the develop project, what is that one costing? So you can see that right here per month. It's always done on a monthly basis. I can see, okay, we're causing 150 euros of costs. And you can even click on it and really see the details, like the actual cloud resources that could have been consumed, like queues, tables, blob storage, like very technical things that you are then booking in the cloud. You can see all of that right here in detail. Yeah, and as mentioned, I can also look at it from a top level view. So here I'm actually looking at chargeback statements. And the chargeback statements are really the multi-cloud view or the meshStack view of cost. So here I can see per project from multiple clouds even what costs were actually cost. So here you can see that the Vela project cost a total of 418 euros across the Azure tenant, GCP tenant, and also the marketplace. With the building blocks, they can also cause some potential cost. You can add, for example, that a building block costs €1 per day or €1 per hour. Like, you can decide to add these custom costs as well. Yeah, click on it and I see it really per platform, what the costs were. So this is the one I showed you before, and then combined with the other ones from the other platforms. Like from Google here, for example, networking costs. Yeah, so you really enable your teams, and that's really important also in the whole saving costs aspect. Is the first step, the most important step, is actually visualizing the costs, because if teams are not aware of them, they don't even know what costs they're going to save. So we make that really easily here, and you can also see it on the project with a nice chart. You can see that here. All right. Yeah, that's the we call it customer area, the customer control plane. This is really where your application teams do all of their management. I have the admin area button right here because I'm logged in as an admin, as a Cloud Foundation admin, but other than that, they wouldn't see it and they would only have one or more customers to work with. So, if there are no further questions, then let's have one last look at the admin area again. So now that we saw what you can do with all of these various aspects in the cloud, in the customer area, it would be great to look at the administration perspective once again, just to see what you are equipped to do there as well. So you just click this button right here and you're back in the admin area. You get back in your dashboard. And this dashboard is already so cool because it really provides the entire Cloud Foundation at a glance. So you can see, okay, hey, how many tenants am I managing right now, with a nice chart, so you can see just kind of the trend. So we see, for example, here, I mean, it's a demo environment, so the data might be a bit lacking, but you can see that over the last year there was a lot of tenant creation. It dipped a little bit and now it's increasing again. We can see finance, so you just also see that slowly, steadily the costs are rising up. This one is very low, of course, but that's just because June is only halfway, so we would expect it to be a lot higher at the end of the month. I can see how many users I'm managing. This is also steadily rising up, and I can see how many policy violations are there. So as mentioned, the policies, if you add a new one later on, or if a user doesn't comply, it shows up also in the dashboard. Yeah, beyond these little information charts, we also have the actions needed section. This is super useful because just in one glance I see actually what I have to take care of. Usually, hopefully, this is just a beautiful big green button, but sadly we have a couple of issues. For example, I have a building block that requires operator input. So one of the building blocks might have been booked by a user and they require some operator input. We might have failing building blocks because maybe the Terraform is broken or something, or there's a misconfiguration. We have some tenants awaiting deletion because we have actually a nice approval process in here, and we have one failed tenant, and so on. So I really see at one glance, hey, in my entire Cloud Foundation, how are we doing, and is there anything I need to take care of? And if you want, you can look into further detail per information layer. So the tenants, you could go into more detail. You can see per month, hey, what type of tenants were created. So you can see this month was one Azure tenant, one AWS tenant. See the actions needed again. I can see how many of all my tenants are managed and unmanaged by meshStack. So if you integrate or start integrating with meshStack, you will have mostly unmanaged tenants because we actually collect these. So meshStack is aware of any tenants that are not part of the mesh model. which could be a huge issue because it's basically flying under the radar and you're not aware of it. So this view really quickly equips you with seeing, hey, maybe there are some tenants that I need to get a hold of. You can also view them in more detail if you click this button. Yeah, I can see popularity of landing zones. This is cool to see maybe particular landing zone is very popular, or maybe it's actually not popular at all and I could remove it, so I can have a view of that as well. Then for finance, it's the same thing again. You just go into more detail. So you saw that we're causing a certain amount of costs, and I can see these costs per platform per month. I can also see the projects that are most expensive. Yeah, and then also for users and compliance and the marketplace, we can look at a couple of more details as well there. All right. Yeah, just to give you some more ideas of the admin area and admin capabilities. So yeah, we saw a lot of concepts already in the customer area, and you can just look at these from a holistic view. So for example, payment methods, you can just see all of them in the entire organization. And you can also see how they're doing budget-wise. So you can see this one is a little bit exceeded, so it's red, it's fully used. Same thing for this one, 800%. That's looking really bad actually. And this one is then 50% left, so it's like halfway through. So I get a quick view of my budget and how they're doing here. Also orange, if it's like getting near ending the budget, it's something I might need to look at. Yeah, just a really nice overview of all the budgets, all the individual budgets and how they're doing, including their metadata again. Then we have chargeback statements. We saw those also already in the customer area, and now I see them pretty much across all customers, right? So I see the customer name here, so I can look at all of them at once. Yeah, I might have particular questions of a project, like I saw, right? So I saw this budget from Liquid Mobile customers doing that, so I can go to the chargeback statements, look at maybe what they're actually doing, what costs they're causing, and just head into the details. Yeah. Then we have yeah, the building blocks. You define them here. You can pick a name, a description. You can add even a little logo to it, so people might find it more familiar. And then you can actually also set up the Terraform integration here. So you would point it to a Git repository. So for the more engineering heavy people, you put your Terraform in Git, you point it via this URL, you add an SSH key perhaps because it's a protected repository, and then the building blocks in meshStack understand it and they will provision new ones as many times as users want. You can add your custom inputs and outputs. This could be sensitive things like here, like a client secret that might be needed to set up the Terraform. It could be user input so that the users actually asked, hey, what do you want this value to be? And it can also be metadata. So for example, we have the platform tenant ID. In Azure's case, this is an Azure subscription, and so you could actually also provide the ID of the subscription yeah, as an input to the Terraform. So there's lots of configurability here as well. And you can also provide any outputs, so things that need to be visible afterwards again, or even add dependencies to this particular building block. There's lots and lots possible in this area. All right. Then we have the unmanaged tenants. As I mentioned before, these are all tenants that are not managed by meshStack. The way this works is because our system already collects all the costs that you're causing in the platform. We also get to know about any tenants that might exist that are not under meshStack's management, and this is just a convenient way to see. And there's a lot here. See, yeah, which tenants I should have a look at, which are not under management right now, which could be a huge issue. Yeah, that is about it, I would say. There's a lot more detailed things to look at. Our software has so many capabilities, but from a high-level perspective, this was it. And yeah, we really covered the most important ground, I would say. Now would be the time to ask any questions in the chat. Otherwise, I would say we close it off for this week. So I'll just let the stream run for a bit. You could ask any questions. And if not, it would be great if you guys, if you liked it or even disliked these presentations, to provide some feedback on our survey. I sent a link in the chat for that, so please fill in the survey if you can. This helps us also improve these sessions. But if there are no questions, I would say that's it. And next week will be another stream. It's either me or someone else from meshcloud showing you around or showing others around. So if you have coworkers maybe or someone interested, yeah, stay tuned for maybe the next one every Wednesday. Okay, thanks a lot for tuning in. This was Jelle from meshcloud, and I wish you a great day and the rest of the day. Thank you.